You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, we've just watched as Congress has counted the electoral votes. Notably, there were no objections and no references to Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. That was a point of consternation among Democrats across the country who watched this and viewed that as a disqualifying factor for Trump. So first off, can you explain, in your opinion, why Democrats didn't bring this up at the certification?
Because unfortunately, the Supreme Court had the last word, and they chose not to remain loyal to the text of the Constitution, which says if you take an oath to support the Constitution and thereafter engage in insurrection, and Donald Trump did, you are disqualified from holding office. And that's great. That's the express language of the Constitution. However, that did not win the day. And Brian, we knew all along it wouldn't win the day, as frustrating as it might have been. Why? Because when the Supreme Court got their unconstitutional mitts on that question, they said, okay, we understand the text of the 14th Amendment, Section 3, and we acknowledge that it seems like an insurrectionist might be disqualified, but not so fast. We are going to create, out of whole cloth, the requirement that Congress pass a brand new law saying that the 14th Amendment says what it means, implementing the disqualification clause of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And Congress, if you do that, then maybe we'll have something to talk about. Well, Brian, we know Congress didn't do that. We knew it was virtually impossible for Congress to do that. In fact, I have to admit, I could envision this 5-justice majority who took this ridiculous position that was not supported in the text of the Constitution over the strong dissent of the 4-justice minority, including Amy Coney Barrett, who said, no, there's no requirement for new legislation, and you shouldn't even have gotten to that issue because it didn't need to be resolved in the 14th Amendment litigation. I could almost envision the 5 justices getting together and having a good chuckle and saying, you see what we did there? We said Congress needs to pass a new law, but we all acknowledge there's not a chance in hell they're going to do it. So Donald Trump will get sworn in again, assuming he wins the election, and it looks like he did. So, we were all hoping that perhaps some members of Congress would say, you know what, let's talk about the 14th Amendment's disqualification, even though we recognize we don't have a path to disqualify Trump given what the Supreme Court ruled. But as we all saw today, as we watched the votes being certified, the 14th Amendment was nowhere to be found. It wasn't even mentioned by any of the members of Congress. On the upside, nobody stormed the Capitol and tried to stop the certification. Why? Well, because a Republican won this time around. So Donald Trump didn't have to call on his goons to try to, stop the certification of his opponent this time around. So this is a dark day. It's a sad day, but it is a fully expected day.
Glenn, what do you say to, and this is me just trying to echo some of the claims of folks who rightfully are upset at what transpired, and I think what they view as a lack of pushback against what was clearly a wrong by Trump and the Republican Party that enabled him. But what do you say to folks who say that this was Democrats capitulating to Republicans and basically affording them a luxury that Republicans weren't even willing to afford Democrats 4 years ago?
I wouldn't call it capitulating. This was the Democrats, including some, constitutional scholars, like, for example, Congressman Jamie Raskin, who knows the Constitution inside and out, acknowledging that the Supreme Court did something that we can't undo. Because when the Supreme Court abuses its discretion, misreads the text of the Constitution on purpose, as they have done multiple times now to, throw Donald Trump an assist, there is no other court or body to which we can appeal. So this was the Democrats not capitulating, but acknowledging that we have a constitutional order, like it or not. And when the Supreme Court announces this is their interpretation of what is required to disqualify someone, I'm sorry, I can disagree with it all day long, and I do, but I don't have anywhere to go above the Supreme Court. So the place we all have to go now is to fight with everything we've got to try to reinstall some legitimacy to the Supreme Court in whatever way we can, and perhaps even more importantly, gear up for the next election. Because, Brian, if this doesn't inspire us to make sure we flip everything at the midterms, then what in the hell will inspire us?
I think that's such a great point. And I think what's important, look, at least for what I do, which is focusing on messaging, we are in a situation right now where every day I think we have to take into account whether what we are saying and what we are doing is serving the purpose of persuading people who we've lost, or bringing people into the political fold who have not been interested in politics, who are disaffected by politics, or who may have left the Democratic Party. Every day, every time we open our mouths, every time we do anything, has to be with that in mind, because we can't go backwards, we can always only go forwards. And so is engaging in what you and I both concede, sadly, is a doomed effort to try and prevent Trump from taking office, when we know full well that the Supreme Court has had its say and that there's no appetite among Democrats or Republicans in Congress to do that? Is that a better use of our time, or is a better use of our time recognizing the fight ahead of us and picking our battles smartly, knowing where to engage, knowing where to fight, and most importantly, knowing what Americans are going to be responding to? Engaging in some doomed effort to prevent Trump from taking office when we know full well that he's going to be taking office because of what the Supreme Court has done here is not going to be the best message to the American people after having lost this election, that we understand the needs that they have right now, that we understand what they want to see in Washington, D.C. It's just not. And again, I don't say this gleefully, because you and I have both spoken at length about what we think should have happened as it relates to the Supreme Court. But the reality is that what should happen and what did happen are two entirely different things. And so given this unfortunate reality that we find ourselves in, we have to think about what's going to be most effective to our movement more broadly moving forward.
Yeah, I would humbly suggest to those people who care about democracy, who care about the rule of law, who care about allegiance to the text of the Constitution, and who care about accountability when people violate the laws of our nation, let's leave the infighting and dysfunction to the Republicans. Because remember, during Trump's first 2 years of his first administration, when he held all the levers of power, dysfunction ruled the day and they accomplished little to nothing. Let's not make that same mistake, those of us who really respect the rule of law and our Constitution and the health and viability of our democracy. Let's join together and focus like a damn laser beam on what is most important now. Let's not fight yesterday's battles. Let's fight tomorrow's battle. Tomorrow's battle is retaking the House and the Senate, which is within our grasp. Let's focus on that. Let's galvanize. Let's unify. And let's flippin' do it.
I completely agree. That was perfectly put. And I would just add one more thing. And I know that there is a sense of people seeing what happened today with the electoral vote certification and feeling like this whole thing is for naught, and that they want to throw their hands up and just disengage completely. And I understand that, but my pushback to that is, do not reward the Republicans by giving them exactly what they want. What they want is for you to disengage, for you to feel disillusioned with the whole process, and for you to throw your hands up and just give up and walk away because you feel like politics isn't working fairly. And it's not working fairly. But do not reward those people by giving them exactly what they want by virtue of leaving the political process. Stay in, be part of the fight, and as we look ahead, I would remind everybody that 8 years ago, I believe this was 8 years ago now, in January of 2017, we were in a similar position, a virtually identical position to the one we are right now. And within 2 years, Democrats would retake the House by the biggest margin in modern American history. So 2 years after that, that would serve as a precursor to Democrats holding on to the House, taking the Senate, and also taking the White House. So there is some light at the end of the tunnel. And remember, Republicans have full control of government right now. The silver lining of that is that they own any successes, but they also fully own any failures. And they've made a lot of broad promises to the American people about bringing the cost of everything from housing to rent to food prices down, and we fully intend to hold them accountable for all of their promises. So a lot can happen in the next couple years here, but I would absolutely echo Glenn's claims here and reiterate that we should be focused like a laser beam on winning moving forward and not fighting yesterday's battles, as unfortunate as that might be. So for those who are watching, if you want to stay in this fight with us, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on the screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.